councils, and I know Claude's been doing this for a long time as well, and David's been working for a long time at the River School. And, you know, we just try to, we have to remember that people have day jobs. They have other things they're doing as well. So thank you. Okay, let me know when I can start, Brendan, so that we can be timely here today.
We're good. We're ready to start.
All right, thank you. And all right, so welcome to the March 23rd meeting of the Community Board 6 Youth and Education Committee. My name is John Keller. I'm chair of the committee. The meeting is called to order at insert time. Oh no, at 6:33 p.m. And tonight we are joined by and invaluably assisted by Community Associate Brendan Berth from the staff of CV6. So we're so fortunate to have such a wonderful staff supporting all the work we do here. I don't know whether we have members of the public here yet, but you could raise questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of the Zoom. And we will field the questions from the public, and we will make time following the committee's discussion to do that. Sean Sherman has volunteered to take the minutes tonight. Thank you, Sean. You all should have received several emails from the board office with a link to a Doodle sign-up sheet for minute takers at committee meetings this year. For your convenience, the link for this committee is also being posted in the chat right now once Brendan gets finished with all of the other things he's doing. At the direction of the board chair, each committee meeting must have a designated meeting taker and a designated backup just in case. To eliminate the guesswork, make sure you volunteer for as many slots on the Doodle sign-up sheet as you can, as much fun as that is. If more than 2 people sign up for a particular month, the office will make sure to distribute the duties equitably, and we'll let you know in advance which months you're due to take minutes. If you have not already filled out the Doodle, please do so right away. The link to the Doodle sign-up form should be in the chat shortly if it is not so already. So now would be a good time to fill it out. Hint, hint. Now we will take attendance by roll call, and Brendan will conduct the roll call. Brendan.
Committee members, I will call your name and you will unmute yourselves. When your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Asiabadi? Asiabadi? Neil Barclay?
Present.
John Keller?
Present.
Okay. Abigail Cruzmark?
Present.
Phil Napolitano?
Present.
Sean Sherman?
Present.
Claudio Winfield?
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Brendan. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there's no objection, we'll adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objection, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the February 23rd meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office, and thank you, Abby, for preparing them so efficiently. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, you may raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objection, the minutes from the February 23rd meeting are adopted, and they will soon be posted on the CV6 website. In order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's just observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Since we're a small committee, we're pretty flexible about that, but you can use your raise hand function if you want to speak, but I'm very flexible on that. Committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand through Zoom. If you click the participants icon, the participants panel should appear, and you should find the raise hand function there. I also think there's a raise hand function at the bottom of the screen for most of you. If you still have technical difficulty, you may click the chat icon and relay your difficulty. The chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. That's because this is a public meeting and the public cannot necessarily see the chat function. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you're having or to state in writing information like an email address that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. When a committee member is given the floor to speak, I'll identify you and you can unmute yourself so you can speak. We're required by executive order to create a verbatim transcript of the meeting, so please keep your questions and comments succinct and germane to the discussion, and don't do like I do and go off on tangents about other unrelated things. Okay, so the order of the adopted agenda shall be followed. So the first item is with much gratitude to Neil and Sean for pulling this together, is a discussion of the ongoing efforts to identify and reach out to students in Community District 6 who are confronting challenges in obtaining Wi-Fi access during remote learning, specifically at PS 116, 40, and 281, also known as the River School. And Neil, I think I'm going to, since you and Sean have done the heavy lifting here, I think I'm going to turn this section of the meeting, as I'm sure you anticipated, over to you and allow you to introduce our speakers and presenters, and as we move ahead, if you don't mind.
Yes, just one second.
Actually, going to mute.
No, I'm here. I'm just making sure I have the list piece. Sorry about that. Okay, so we can start with Lisa. It's, from the New York City Bar Association.
Hi.
Hi,
So
Lisa. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thanks
you
for joining
wanna-
us.
Do you want me
Welcome.
to
Thank you.
just talk about background, or are you going to ask me questions?
You can do both. You can give us your
Okay.
background.
Yeah, Lisa, I think, I'm sorry. The background you gave me, Lisa, when we first spoke was incredibly helpful to my understanding of the situation. I think it would be
Okay.
helpful to the committee.
Okay, sure. So I actually work for the City Bar Justice Center, which is the nonprofit arm of the New York City Bar Association. And we provide legal services, and we use lawyers helping us from the legal community and law students to help to do pro bono and work with us on a number of challenges and issues and client populations that we represent. So I run a project called the Legal Clinic for the Homeless. And what I did prior to pandemic was go into homeless shelters in Manhattan and the Bronx and run legal clinics for homeless families in these shelters. So I first realized there was a problem with shelters and internet probably about 2.5 or 3 years ago when I tried to run a remote legal clinic at a shelter using, the lawyers would stay in their, offices in Manhattan. I would connect via Skype and be sitting with the clients, and I couldn't connect. And I asked the director of the shelter, what's the deal with Wi-Fi? Well, yeah, there's not much connectivity here in this room, in this big room. We have the caseworkers can connect to Wi-Fi on, this floor. And I said, well, what about the clients? Oh, the clients don't have Wi-Fi. And I said, really? And I said, do shelter residents have Wi-Fi anywhere? She says, I don't really think so. And then I started talking to the clients, and I was realizing, the clients were buying smartphones. And I'm like, why are my clients buying smartphones when they can get these free phones? I started asking the clients questions. Well, we need the smartphones, we need data plans to connect to the internet, we need Wi-Fi hotspots. We don't have Wi-Fi in the shelter. When we can't connect, we go, we'll go to McDonald's or we'll go to the library, but it's really impossible. And I'm like, well, what are you paying for these, data plans and Wi-Fi hotspots? And they were telling me they were paying $90, between $70 and $90 a month. And many of them, you know, they're all low income, some are working, and many are on public assistance with, you know, you have a mom with one child who gets no more than $145 in cash every 2 weeks, and she's spending $90 for her, you know, her data connection through her phone. So I decided at that point to survey other, you know, this was one shelter I was sort of really honing in on the questions in the Bronx. And then I decided we're going to survey the 6 or 7 shelters where we go, and we're going to write a report about it. And, you know, we found that, you know, the overwhelming majority of our clients did not have Wi-Fi access through their shelters. They accessed Wi-Fi through their phones when they could. The data wasn't always, sometimes they couldn't, you know, they didn't always have data on their phones. They paid for just set plans. Some of them even, you know, really needed Wi-Fi hotspots to back it up, and they paid extra for that. So, you know, and, you know, we figured out we should do something about this. And this is pre-pandemic. So I did the survey September, I can't even remember anymore. September of 2019, we were doing the surveys. We came out, we finished the report February 2020, you know, which found basically, you know, found all these findings about clients' inability to access the internet consistently and paying for Wi-Fi and data plans. We finished the report, and then boom, the pandemic hit, and we titled our report, "Homeless Need Internet or Wi-Fi to Search for to Find a Home." Then pandemic hit. Then we knew, you know, remote learning was a thing. So we had to add more, you know, a couple more paragraphs to our report on, you know, how kids couldn't access the internet remotely. And we issued this report, and we then, you know, basically got about 30 to 40 organizations to endorse the report. And we sent it out to the mayor and all over the place, to media outlets and the mayor, and started what we called with the city bar, with the New York City Bar Association, the Wi-Fi for Homeless campaign, which, you know, we garnered lots and lots of support, which was great. City council people, you know, were backing us, and we were sending letters to the DOE about the issue. And I guess what really, you know, meanwhile, while this is happening, right? A few shelters in the Bronx that I work with, Bronx Works, decided they could not, you know, the city was not moving forward with providing Wi-Fi, you know, at the start of the pandemic for the kids in shelter who had been given tablets, right? And the tablets, many of them iPads, were not functioning, whether because they were not functional, whether it was because of there was not sufficient Wi-Fi at the shelter. There were a number of reasons why the tablets weren't working, but these shelters knew that they had to get Wi-Fi in as a backup plan so the kids could connect. And they contracted a very small contractor who came in and just put hotspots in the hallways of their shelters, right? In the corridors of the shelters. And they did this over the summer, and and it was successful. The kids were able to connect. It was a very easy thing for them to do. It happened very quickly. And the kids were able to connect starting in September, which was great. A few other shelters, Homes for the Homeless shelters, I believe, did this also, or no, yeah, I believe it was Homes for the Homeless, and maybe one other shelter provider also contracted, same person, same very local small company to install these Wi-Fi hotspots in corridors. It happened quickly. It was good. September comes around, and, you know, the Times comes out with an article about, you know, kids are not connecting remotely. Homeless kids aren't connecting. They cite our report, which is great. And at some point, the mayor announces, we're going to put Wi-Fi in all shelters. This has to happen. And this is in October. Right. So then nothing is happening. And, we're legal. At this time, I'm contacting legal aid and sending them clients and going, you got to do something, because he said he's going to do it. And we don't see any movement. It was November. It was around, by the second week in November, nothing was happening. And so legal aid filed a class action lawsuit, and the city, at that point agreed and said, okay, we're going to start on the work in the shelters. And the work to install Wi-Fi, began, I believe, in December, and it's ongoing right now. But the last thing we've heard is they're not going to complete the work until the next school year. Start of the next school year won't be completed. Okay. As far as I understand, legal aid is, the lawsuit's pending. There may be settlement discussions going on right now. That's about all I can say. But the agency in charge of ensuring the internet gets installed in the shelters is, I believe it's DUITT, which I don't know what that stands for. And they're using two huge providers to do the work, contracted providers. And I think there was an article, there were a couple of articles about how these small, shelter providers, Bronx Works, and the other two managed to do it very quickly. So there was some publicity about that. Anyway, that's about, did I leave anything out, Sean?
No, I think that was really helpful. I think the only thing that might have come up in questions, just anything about particularly with our area.
Yeah. Okay. So there's one shelter where I ran legal clinics, and I still continue to service the residents of the shelter. It's called Children's Rescue Fund House East. It's on East 28th Street. I do know, after speaking to the director of family services there, that they were wiring the building. It's a big shelter. There are, I believe, at least 170 units, not all with families with school-age children. It's a mixed, there's adult families there as well. But I think the last I heard that they were doing the work at that shelter. I also haven't heard, just so you know, I used to get complaints about the children not being able to connect to Wi-Fi, and there being issues with the iPads. The complaints aren't coming in like they came in the spring and this past fall. So, I think DOE has gotten much better at resolving problems. I know I did call them about a case or two in the fall, and, they got out and they visited the client, at least two of the clients, and swapped out iPads with, what happened is a lot of the iPads did not, I think they were, Optimum was the provider, and they had to, Verizon works better and more across the city, much better. And they were able to swap out the, I don't know if it's the SIM card. I'm not a big techie, even though I'm working on this issue. And they were able to swap out the iPad, and it's data enabled with a Verizon plan, and they seem to be working better. But, the iPad, they need Wi-Fi as a backup. And these children are going to all need, even prior to the pandemic, they needed Wi-Fi to, there's work that children need to do, right? We all know, on the internet. And they also need printers, and they need other things to support their learning in shelters. But that's the one shelter I do know that's in your district. And I do know that they've started the work there. I don't know what stage it's at.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions?
No, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to to inform her. It's Do It, DOIT.
Okay, thank you.
They handle all of the city tech stuff.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to add to what Claude said, this is Brendan from the CB6 staff. It stands for the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications, which I know is a mouthful.
Yes, everybody says, right, what, do it or do it or, right,
Yeah, do it or
do it,
do it.
right.
Neil, do you want to?
Excuse me, Lisa.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Next time I'll raise my hand. Do you know how many homeless shelters within CB6 house homeless families that have students, as opposed to a homeless shelter that doesn't have young students?
No, I don't. But I just went to a webinar run by a group called Teach New York that's sort of connected with Advocates for Children. And it showed me how to get data on individual schools and how many homeless children are in individual schools. So, and when they talk about homeless children, it's also it's children who are doubled up is a large portion of the homeless and how they count homeless students. So it's the largest, it's doubled up, and children in shelters, and there are other categories of children they consider homeless as school children they consider homeless as well. So I don't have the data, but you might be able to find it. I don't know.
Neil, how do you want to proceed? Do you want to have all of our presenters speak? I know we have some attendees.
We can. We can jump on. We can jump to the next person. That's fine. So that would be Allison Miles. She was nice enough to join us today. Allison is a counselor at PS 116. And just would note, last year when I was a public member of the committee, Allison, I had frequent contact with Allison about different ways that we could reach out to children in transitional housing at PS 116. So I've been able to build a relationship with Allison, and she's been very, very helpful. So.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Barkley, and for putting a face to the name, actually. Can you hear me?
Yes. But now I think you're on mute now.
You just muted yourself, I think, accidentally.
Yeah, I think you're on. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I just want to make one correction. I'm a student in temporary housing community coordinator, not a counselor. So I work particularly with students in temporary housing at PS 116. While our school is not a community school, we are also under the Office of Community Schools. So I answer directly to the principal at PS 116, and I also, community coordinators also have support from regional managers under the Department of Education. Do you want me to speak in particular to internet servicing or?
Well, yeah, I know when we had talked about some of the internet service issues at PS 116, I guess there were a lot of the issues were already being addressed, but sure, you could speak about that, or also just the general outreach, or not the outreach, but the general work that you do with children in transitional housing. I know because PS 116, I think they usually hover somewhere between 9 to 11% of children who are in transitional housing. So perhaps you can talk about what your work is there with them.
Okay. So I support students who are in temporary housing, whether that is in a shelter, hotel, and doubled up mainly. Thankfully, PS 116 don't have students who live in their cars or otherwise. I support the parents. I assist with finding resources in the community. We work closely with linking them to resources. We work with students we follow the guidelines of the McKinney-Vento federal law of 1987, the New York State law 32-9. So basically, students are supported for a year after they transition into permanent housing. And so these parents are supported, whether it's to find resources in the community, or anything around school, busing, metro cards, whatever they need in that respect. Finding places for them to find food. Some of the students in hotels, they in some of the shelters or hotels, they may have to go out there and find meals, because in the hotels they don't have stoves. In most of the shelters, I know that one of the shelters is currently putting in not only Wi-Fi, but they're also putting in hot plates and so for the families. I assist greatly with attendance and just building that rapport with parents, because most of them have issues around returning to shelters, going to different places. Like they might be in Manhattan and then next week they might be in the Bronx or in Brooklyn, and they still need that support, whether it's with busing or whatever the case is. So attendance is a big issue, and assisting them with being at school or why they're not there, just supporting them and know that they have the support from the school and from the DOE. One of the things that has come up a lot is parents who have been transitioning to permanent housing. And I have been concerned because some of these parents may be receiving assistance like WIC and so from our community, and then they get permanent housing. So they're getting assistance for housing, and then that pillow or cushion under them with the WIC or so is removed. And some of these patients, some of them might be working, and the money that they're working for cannot support them. You know, after they pay, some of them have daycare to pay for because they have younger kids. And we also support those students, not only those at PS 116, but the entire family. So,
And just a question. So with I guess children being remote now, students logging in, remoting in. What how's your interaction been with students and parents? Have you been doing, I guess, Zoom, FaceTime, or any other way to phone calls? How's your communication been?
So I do a lot of phone calls, and I visit the shelters a lot. I like in person. I like to talk to people because sometimes even the phone doesn't give you the picture of what is really happening with a family who may be having an issue. So I visit the shelters a lot. I work annually, so we also work during the summer, and the interaction is okay. You know, right now the PS 116 do not really have much issue with the iPads because the DOE has been providing internet services with the iPads. Yes, there are issues with Wi-Fi, but the DOE students, public school students do not need Wi-Fi to access the iPads. They do need iPads. They do need Wi-Fi for other things, but to access their school work, they do not need Wi-Fi because it's already built into the iPads that they have. But parents still do not have that connection. While the students have the connection with their iPads, the parents do not have ways and means of accessing Wi-Fi.
Yeah, that limitation on the Wi-Fi and the Wi-Fi enabled iPads is an issue. Like even with something, I think it's an issue with Regents exams and the AP exams as well. That's come up that people didn't expect, that they're looking for a workaround now. I believe it's you're right, because it's limited to the DOE use. Like,
Just a question I would have before, opening up to other committee members. Do you do any work at the Children's Rescue Fund? Do you have any students there?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I see my regional manager is here also, so.
Neil, do you want to introduce our the latest arrival here?
Allison is doing a great job.
It sounds like it.
Good to see you.
My kids have been in public school for 13 years, and I don't know what they would do without their guidance counselors. So thank you. And I know you're
A social worker.
specifically assigned as a social worker, but I just love together all the fine work you folks do and compliment it highly. Thank you very much.
I want to articulate about the Wi-Fi. What happened was when we started out in September and even back in March, April, May, June, many of the facilities did not have access because the buildings were hundreds of years old and it was very hard to get Wi-Fi access in the buildings. If you were living in a basement apartment, in some shelters, you can be in the basement, you wouldn't be able to get Wi-Fi. Legal Aid brought a class action suit to the city, and before you know it, individual shelters started making arrangements for Wi-Fi in every room. I can't say it's across the board, across the 5 boroughs, but I do know that at Children's Rescue Fund, they have Wi-Fi, they've enabled it. You've got to watch out for the wires in the hallway, but it's there. That's not an issue. There are other issues that we can talk about, but Wi-Fi is not the issue.
You, I guess, I know you spoke to, you have spoken to Sean. So, Sean, anything that you wanted to, I guess, add or you think that we should address just based upon your conversation?
No, I think Iris had great information similar to Lisa with respect to background, but coming from the DOE perspective. And I thought it would be really helpful for us all to hear from her. And I know, and I think one of the questions that one of the committee members had asked before Iris joined was whether there are other shelters in the district. And I think that Iris answered that as well.
We have 14 hotels in District 2. You're in District 2. But because you're on the east side, and Sean, I do believe we did this, Children's Rescue Fund at 4 East 28th Street is the only shelter within your purview. And it's run by Icon House. There are needs there. There are needs for food. My biggest concern, next week, there's going to be an all-out effort to get children back in person. So, and they're doing this. And Allison, I don't understand why they're doing this next week when the schools are all on vacation. I don't get that, but all right. I have found, now I cover District 2 and 3, and I can tell you, predominant families predominantly are doing remote learning. And I get the feeling they don't want to go back to schools no matter what. And I think that with de Blasio opening up the city May 1st, with us trying to bring back in-person learning, with us opening up the high schools and now the middle schools, parents are phobic. They don't want to send their children to school. There's been such a loss of learning this year that it's a real travesty. And I would like to just hold everybody back a year and like, let's have a do-over. But that's my own subjective opinion.
It's an informed opinion. Thank you. Unfortunately informed. I'd like to open this. First of all, I noticed we have several attendees from the public as well.
Well, I would, John, I'm sorry, just we have one more person, David Silva. He was part
of the team here. Sorry.
Yeah, no, so he was nice enough to join us, and David is a member of the PTA at the River School, and he and I, we had a discussion about his work there, and so David, you can tell us a little bit more.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Neil and John and everyone on the committee. And thank you, Ms. Niles, for your update on what you all are doing at 116. And I've been a parent at River School for the last 6 years, and most of that time I've been on the executive board. And I, last year, obviously, we were concerned about families in our community at PS 281 who might have, trouble with the tech. The first kind of indication I had that something was amiss was when I had come across a spare computer, and I put on our Parent Square board that I had a free computer for anyone who wants it. And I was completely inundated with parents who were like, "Oh my God, I need that." And I'm thinking like, well, I thought everybody got iPads. But I think, that was when I realized, that maybe wasn't a panacea. And, and thinking about how hard it would be to try to work Google Classroom on an iPad, with the little on-screen keyboard and everything. So we had some conversations within the PTA, and it turned out that it was actually a parent, another parent in the community who had been working on basically raising money to buy laptops for kids who needed them. And she had already been able to round up some laptops, and we just reached out to the administration and said, "Hey, have you guys identified anybody who need, any students who would benefit from having a laptop?" And they were able to identify some folks. And so we basically, or that parent gave the laptops to the administration, and they discreetly distributed them to the families who needed them. And that was great. That was something that really the PTA had almost nothing to do with. Like, there was this parent who had already been working on that, and we just kind of connected the dots. But I think we wanted to explore that further, and Neil, from talking to Neil, had some good ideas, and really the idea that really the teachers know. The teachers know what's going on, because they can tell who which kids are struggling in staying on top of the remote learning, which kids are struggling with connectivity or with understanding how to use the platform. Or for little kids, obviously, the parents are going to need to be super involved, or some adult needs to be involved in keeping them on task and helping them use it. And so I reached out to our assistant principal, and she gave me an update on sort of what's been going on since then. So after the 15 Chromebooks that we distributed back in October, there were, in December, it sounds like there was a delivery of new iPads from the DOE that had the cellular data plans. And so that helped. And apparently there's a few left in inventory. So if there's other folks who need them, they can turn that around pretty quickly. And it sounds like the biggest challenge since then has not been access to a device, but difficulty with using the technology. And so there are a couple of school aides, as well as all the teachers and paraprofessionals, who are spending a lot of time every morning walking families through accessing the websites, signing into the digital classrooms, using the different applications. I think, as a parent, I feel like River School has done a great job in managing the transition to remote learning and like keeping an engaging, robust curriculum. But it has involved like throwing a lot of new, apps and new websites and different logins and stuff at families. And for those who are, on the wrong side of the digital divide, I think that's proved to be a real challenge. And I was talking to her about, maybe if there's a role for parent volunteers, so the techies in the parent community could maybe help out some of the less technologically inclined caregivers. But in the meantime, they're continuing to sort of survey the teachers and see, what the needs are for different kids, and let us know if there are any other ways that the PTA could help, or that other things could help. I also wanted just to mention two other quick quick things. One is that I was sort of looking around for like, are there other organizations out there that are focused on this, you know, on trying to support families who are struggling with remote learning. And I found a wonderful organization called Parents Supporting Parents, which is a Black-led mutual aid organization that has just been raising money to buy laptops for, you know, New York City school kids who need them to succeed in remote learning, and really taking that one, you know, that 15 laptop thing that one of our parents did, and independently had come up with, you know, their own plan for doing that on a much bigger scale. They actually got matching through PC Richards. So they were like throwing, you know, however many laptops they were able to purchase with the money that they had raised. PC Richards was matching that. And they've just been distributing them, you know, all over the city, including in Community Board 6. So I just wanted to highlight that organization, and the woman who runs that, Tanisha Grant, is amazing and, you know, working super hard. And I think if there's anybody, anybody on the community board or, you know, attending this who wants to, you know, help support that cause, it's a wonderful organization. You can find more about them at pspnyinc.org. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, you know, goes back to something that that Lisa had talked about earlier in terms of Wi-Fi for for families that don't have access to that. I just heard the other day that there was this Cuomo made this announcement about a new partnership called Connect Ed NY, which is a partnership with some private philanthropy to provide hotspots and data plans for students in the most economically disadvantaged school districts. So it sounds like they have $10 million in funds for this, and should be enough to provide data-enabled hotspots for approximately 50,000 students. So this could be, you know, pretty cool. It sounds like New York City is one of the school districts that, you know, that is eligible for this, obviously. But it sounds like the next step is that like each school district has to like apply to this initiative to participate, and come up with a plan for how they're going to how they're going to distribute them. But I don't know if you know what, I can put the links for these in the chat if that's helpful. But I just wanted to flag that because it sounds like it's like hot off the presses.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to be quiet because I have a lot of comments that I would like to open this up. First of all, to other members of the other members of the committee, or our fine guests who have added such valuable comment first. So why don't I do that? And you can either just use the raise hand function or speak up. I'm comfortable either way. And then I noticed that we do have attendees from the public here, and I want to be sure we get, Brendan, I want to be sure we get any comments or questions that they have, into the discussion. But first, members of the committee or people who are here.
Claude has his hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something for Phil. Phil asked a question about the shelters. And basically, we don't have family shelters, but we have 30th Street, which is our largest shelter, which is adult. At one time, they actually did have a family shelter in the 30th Street building. I don't know what happened to it, but there was one there. We have the New Providence shelter, which is for women, which is like 49th Street, I'm not sure. And then we have the Safe Haven, which is on 17th Street, primarily for the most hardcore homeless. And then we have the Vanderbilt, which services relief of 30th Street and other congregate shelters. In other words, because of COVID. So given it's that we're not contiguous with the school board. Our boundaries are different. So the nearest family thing that we have is, I think, the one that was mentioned, which is the children, what is it called, on 28th Street?
Children Rescue Fund.
Yeah, the Children Rescue Fund. So most of our kids would not be in any shelter that is in Community Board 6. They may be in shelters, but not specifically Community Board 6.
And that's an issue across district too. I'll just add that quickly, right?
He's absolutely right. When I spoke about shelters, I'm thinking family shelters, and he's talking about adult shelters, men's shelters, women's shelters. And you're right, there was a shelter on 30th Street, which closed down and I believe turned into a men's shelter. So you're absolutely right about that.
Any
You
other
should
comments?
also know there are people in these adult shelters who are also trying to, get their GED, do college courses, and they need internet as well to engage in learning. So our Wi-Fi for Homeless campaign is really about getting all shelters wired for Wi-Fi, which there's no commitment at this point. But there are a few state legislators who are, there's actually Senator Biaggi has introduced a bill, and there may be one other bill out there that's going to address this issue. I mean, whether it gets passed is another story, but we're very cognizant of the fact that there's, adults trying to learn in shelter too, and they need the internet. And everybody needs like printers and other, equipment really to help them with their learning as well.
Lisa, could you send the information on that bill to Neil or?
Sure.
Would you please? Because that's something. Abby, I noticed you have your hand up, and Phil, I'm going to go to you next, but Abby hasn't spoken yet.
Hi, thank you so much all for being here. I just want to mention that we had a parent advocate from our district, I don't remember the school, on, I believe it was end of last year, November, and he was saying that getting devices into the hands of children who do not currently have them was not so much a question of money, but of logistics. So I just want to kind of pick David's brain. You mentioned that the laptop distribution was sort of driven by a parent who had raised funds, and there's been other examples of that. So my question is really twofold. One, does every child who needs one currently have access to a device such as the iPad? And then two, if that's not the case, do you think it's a question of money or is it a question of logistics?
Yeah, that's a great question. And my biggest concern was that it might be just a problem of information, of what if a family doesn't know that they can request an iPad from the city, or what if they don't know that if the iPad isn't working for them, they can express that to the teachers and say, we're having trouble with this iPad, or are they just gonna think that they don't have any recourse? So that's why I was kind of pushing our assistant principal to ping the teachers, because I figured the teachers might have sort of a sixth sense about that. And even if the family didn't specifically reach out and ask for it, they might know that someone would benefit from something like that. At this point, the administration is telling me that no, there is no, to your first question, there's no student that doesn't have a device. So that's good. The second question, is it more money or logistics? I think it's a combination of information and logistics. Because I think, the PTA has, we have a like emergency fund basically in our budget where if there are families who are experiencing financial hardship, we can consider, buying laptops if that's what they need, or, whatever it is. And I think that the members of the PTA have been really, supportive of that. We just haven't had to do it yet because nobody's, because the administration hasn't come back to us with, okay, this is what we need and this is who needs what. But since I kind of renewed that conversation with the assistant principal, she did say, oh, we have this one family that, we have a very high percentage of, immigrant families, and, people where English is a second language. And so there was one student who needed a laptop that had Cyrillic characters on the keyboard so that they could use it for their first language and English. So that's something that we may be able to help out with. But I think the logistics thing is made easier by having the administration be an intermediary, because I think families would, maybe not feel comfortable asking the PTA for help directly, and then having us know, like, people's financial situation and whatnot. So I think having it go through the school lets us kind of preserve confidentiality and make sure that they're going to the right places.
Thank you, David. I'll hold my comments again. Phil, I noticed your hand up again, please.
Thanks. Very quickly, Lisa had mentioned early on that some families were paying a lot of money for their Wi-Fi connectivity. And I just wanted to let it be known that from my experience, unlimited plans are available for perhaps half of what you had mentioned. You could go to T-Mobile, for example, and that's well advertised. Could be a source if someone needs Wi-Fi. They could put it on their phone and then connect a laptop to it if that is a problem.
Right, and there's Lifeline, which which is free mobile phone service for people of limited income. But I'm not sure if you can use that
a lot
for-
of the clients complain that it's not an adequate service for many reasons. So
Yeah, not
that's why
surprising.
they're getting other phones. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure the data is probably super limited on those plans.
Okay, let me, if there are any other comments from members of the committee or from our panelists, because I know we have members of the public who are in attendance who have some questions, which I'm going to ask Brendan to monitor here. So if it's okay, and I noticed that Kyle Atide, the chair of Community Board 6, is present. So Kyle, do you have any comments at this point, or do you want us just to move on?
No, let's hear from the public.
Okay.
I just want to thank everybody again, particularly the parents and Neil for leading all of this as well.
Excellent.
As well, John. Yeah.
Okay. So Brendan, would you monitor the Q&A and make sure that the attendees here are recognized and have a chance to comment?
Yeah, I actually see that a Matthew Weintraub has asked a question about transferring excess food from shelters, which is not completely related to the discussion, but I see that one of the speakers tonight would like to answer to this.
And I think you wanted to address this.
I had responded to him, when you get donations of food.
I think we're having trouble hearing you, I think.
I'm unmuted.
Okay, now you are. Good.
Okay. With donations of food, if it's packaged food, I am sure the shelter would be happy to take it. If it's restaurant food and leftover food, I don't know if they're able to. I have to check. I can find out tomorrow. I put my email address in there. I also, any child that you have, school-wise, I'm not talking about the adults that are having issues. If they don't have equipment, if there's an issue with that, I can clarify that and I can research that. I can certainly help. Insofar as the River School, I just would like to respond to this. David, That's a beautiful school, best library I've seen. It's really nice. I've been in it and the staff is lovely. You have 14 STH children, student in temporary housing. Of the 14, 3 live in shelters, 2 are siblings, and they're in the Bronx. 1 is in Manhattan and Harlem. I know that they all have internet access. The rest are on what we call doubled up status, and therein might lie an issue with internet access. You could be living in an apartment, you could be sleeping on a floor, on a mattress somewhere, and you could not have internet in that apartment. And those are children I don't have ready access to, because at least they have a bathroom they can go into. You know, they have a kitchen they can go into. It's not like living in a shelter. So if you have any questions around that, I put my email address in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Iris. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Brendan, do we know if any of our other attendees have comments or anything they wish to add at this point?
I don't see any other questions currently.
I'll wait a moment and give anyone who does, because they've gone to the trouble of being here, give them a chance to put a question. Okay, first of all, this has been a really valuable, thank you very much, Ms. Niles, Ms. Perlstein, Mr. Silva, Ms. Gersted. Thank you very much for taking your time, and I really want to thank Neil and Sean for pulling this together. What I think is a next step here, first of all, I'll be very brief. At least I've heard of a lot of ad hoc responses here. You know, that one school is doing great stuff, or another school is doing great stuff, and we have a terrific social worker doing one thing in one school, and I think, you know, one of the useful things that we can do as we move ahead is, you know, try to start thinking of some systemic responses to this, you know, across the district, across the city. But I'd like to stay focused on CB6 and the schools we have here in CB6. So Sean, I noticed that you're fortunate enough to be taking minutes as well as having helped put this together. So let's capture what we heard here this evening, and you know, at our next meeting, have you know, the next time we have an opportunity to discuss this, you know, some clear next steps as to you know, how we proceed. So all of this good work and valuable discussion doesn't just stop here this evening, because I do believe, and we're having some discussions with different people in the DOE, that there are issues that you folks have raised here tonight that have implications well across the district and well across the city. So I think that's extremely valuable if we capture that and move ahead. Thank you. I'm going to continue with the rest of the agenda with the idea that we're not going to let this drop. All right, make that very clear to everyone. And our guests are free to leave or free to stay for the rest of the meeting. The next part of the agenda is the chair's report, and I'll be very brief. It's always nice to for the committee to be able to brag on something. We last meeting we passed a resolution urging the Department of Education and the Chancellor to listen to the Comptroller Stringer and hold harmless the schools who lost attendees this year as a result of the pandemic and not have to repay the DOE. And I noticed in the news today that the mayor and the chancellor have announced that that indeed will happen, that schools will be held harmless that did that lost attendees this year. And you know, I'm happy for us to take partial credit for that. If that helps, I'm sure the controller had more to do with it than we did. And then the other thing is we are working with representatives of District 2 and the Department of Education to have a session, hopefully at our next meeting, we're still working this out, addressing these issues on a broader scale, you know, at the next meeting, where we will hopefully invite principals from across CB6 zone and perhaps beyond, and have some senior DOE folks here because there were some questions here tonight that I would love to see them answer. You know, why isn't this being done more broadly? Why is it up to David and his team at the River School to come up with these things? And I'll stop making my speech there and be quiet. On old and new business, Phil, I'm going to come to you again on the work with the department. We had a very valuable meeting with the Department of Youth and Children's Services and Child Development and Community Development, excuse me. And would you just be able to give a brief summary of what was discussed at that meeting? Because I've asked you to take the lead on this, as I've asked Neil to take the lead on education.
Sure. Thank you, John. So a bunch of committee members and exec committee members spoke with DYCD on Friday regarding their youth workforce deployment efforts, specifically the Summer Youth Employment Program, which in 2019 provided summer jobs for somewhere around 70,000 students. And that's training as well as jobs. And they were hoping that we could recruit some of the private businesses in our district to sign up for the program and to accept some of these students to work for them. The city pays either a stipend or pays them by hour. So these students are like volunteers for these local businesses for about 5 or 6 weeks over the summer. And DYCD said that they'd send us some literature, some information, and our effort was going to be on distributing the information and hopefully getting some businesses to say, yes, I'd like to have some of these young students join my company for a few weeks and work with us. So that was really the brunt of their message was, let's get more private businesses enlisted.
Now, and these kids are basically, are they free labor that's paid for by the city when they come to the institution, or does the institution pay them? How does that work?
No, it was my understanding that the city paid the students, so it's free labor, and
that's what I thought. I wanted to be sure because I'm sure there are a lot of restaurants around the city. You know, if we communicate with our business, our BASA committee, who would be really good targets for who just trying to get back on their feet this summer, who could use this sort of thing. That's just quick off the top of my head.
Yeah, and if I could jump in as well, John, just to add further detail to what you just said. So for those who are unfamiliar with the SYE program, basically a local business actually partners up with a local community-based organization to provide these young people with jobs. So a lot of the preparation, mentorship also happens through this community-based organization, so that businesses who have never necessarily worked with young people or worked within the scope of the SYEP are not completely unprepared to take on young people and provide them with skill sets and any other extracurricular support that they might need. So this is done through that. It is more than just showing up to a job and getting some labor done. It is really about making that connection for young people about purpose and getting that work experience that will help them in future endeavors and obviously for their college applications and things like that. So in the conversation, one of the things was making sure that there were meaningful opportunities, so that it wasn't just like, hey, we need some bodies here to help around the store or the office or whatever it might be, but that there was a specific type of project or meaningful experience that these young people could have. One of the other questions that we all discussed with DYCD, which they're actually getting back to us with as well, is we asked a lot of great questions on which industries were most underrepresented. So which types of businesses were least likely to be participating in this type of program, and also which communities who were underrepresented as participants themselves. So as we look at the district, I want us to keep that in mind as well, is like which types of businesses could we be engaging that aren't necessarily at the table but may want to be at the table, or who needs extra prodding, and then also targeting our outreach as well. Who are the people who are underrepresented in this program as well, and making sure that we're doing even more to reach out to them. So I thought it was a productive conversation. I think, youth and education, I've asked John to take the lead on this, even with coordination with other committees. Obviously, there is crossover with a number of different committees the further we get into this and making sure that we're targeting our outreach. So I'm looking forward to the work of John, Phil, and Neil on this as well.
Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, this is kind of exciting, but I also think it was a really good idea in that meeting to narrow the scope of what we're trying to do instead of trying to do a little bit of everything. Let's get very specific about what we could do because there are strengths and weaknesses to what we could do as a community board. Let's make sure we focus on the strengths. One of the lessons I'm constantly learning as a chair, let's focus on what we can really do. I believe in exceptional cases in hour-long meetings. So is there any other, we obviously have things we want to move on ahead with here, but is there any other new business that people would like to put up, or any old business they'd like to remind us of? I follow up. I did contact the controller's office. And we'll report on that at the full board meeting as to what we heard back, rather than take more time here. Abby, I see your hand.
I'm so sorry because this is not super related, but I wanted to flag that there was a pretty major fire on 37th Street today. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware. I don't know any details, but just putting this on everyone's radar.
Okay, where 37th and where? Which
First, right near the river school, actually.
Yeah, it was between First and it's right across the block from me, actually. So I'm still getting information on that as well. It seemed pretty serious, but I don't know about any fatalities or anything like that. So we are monitoring that.
Thank you, Abby. Thank
Yeah,
you.
just to interject, as of 2 hours ago, no injuries were being reported. So hopefully that remains the case.
Yes.
Yes, good. Is there anything else that any member of the committee wants to bring up? That I think we're starting to gel as a group here and starting to get some direction as to where we're going, and I'm feeling pretty good about it. Seeing none, I will make a motion to adjourn, which does not have to be seconded.
Yeah, John, I'm sorry, just quickly, one thing I wanted to add with the speakers. If anyone else on the committee would like to, participate in more of the outreach and seeing what we can do with maybe alleviating or solving some of the Wi-Fi access problems. What we're hoping is that a committee member may take on a school to work with. So example, PS40 or other schools in the district. We're hoping a committee member can take on 1 or 2, and then we can reach out to them and see what their students there are lacking or need. I just wanted to throw that out there.
And Brenda, did we ever put the doodle out of the schools for people to sign up for? We were going to do that, and to be honest, it just went through my sieve of the brain. So it might be a good idea to do that, and because I would like everyone on the committee, especially if we get new members, to sign up for a couple schools. Obviously, Neil has signed up for the River School at 116, and I have a couple I would like to do. And then the other thing I want to do, since we're continuing on things we want to plan for, is I would like to have another member of the committee step up and take responsibility for working on the budget with Kavitha and the board office on budgetary matters. As I've discovered, if I don't delegate things, they don't get done. So far between Phil and Neil, I've been pretty lucky. So it's working well. Okay. Once again, any other comments or issues? I'm always happy to continue talking, but I think we've been at this for over an hour, and I'd like to be respectful that you all have lives and families. So I'll make a motion again to adjourn, which doesn't need to be seconded. So I'm adjourning the meeting at 7:42 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brendan, as always.